May the force be with you is a phrase used to wish a person well to overcome a challenge. The invitation in this podcast, May the life force be with you, is to explore what it means to truly feel alive, to appreciate the physical, emotional and spiritual connection to our energy, and finally to understand how this impacts who you are and all that you do. May this conversation inspire you to thrive. This episode of May the Life Force Be With You is brought to you by Moment Company and the Moment Pebble. The Moment Pebble is a beautiful, natural stone, light-guided breathing device and is a unique gift for someone who needs that gentle reminder to stop and take a break, to take moments throughout their busy day and to practice mindfulness. Just head over to momentcompany.co, that's momentcompany.co, and enter the code LIFEFORCE at checkout to receive an exclusive 10% podcast discount. Hello everybody and welcome to our latest episode of May the Life Force Be With You. And this episode is definitely brought to you from as we have the most amazing guest with us this evening. This is an evening recording for us, and that is Jo Roberts. And she is an earth keeper and shamanic witch based in rural Australia. Now, she has a passion for working with plants, people, and community. And she's the founder of the NFP Red Earth Ecology, which combines art, place, and nature to connection to reawaken identification with the earth and personal agency. She's an artist and deep ecology facilitator, a gardener, a singer, a magician, and a feminist shit stirrer who is service to life and the cosmos. Wow, what an introduction, Jo. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. You've got to take full advantages of these paragraphs that you're given to really let it rip and condense it all.
You let it rip. I love it.
That's it sounds pretty amazing when it's 35 years work condensed into a paragraph. But there's been plenty of, spells in my life when it hasn't been that exciting. Yeah, really overjoyed to be here with you both in various time slots. Yeah.
And you mentioned just before we pressed record that you had spent some time, because of that time zone variance, we're doing this later in the evening, and sometimes, as we all know, our life force fluctuates throughout the day. And you'd mentioned that you'd set some intention and done some grounding to get ready for this. And if it's all right, I'd love to ask you to share what that intention setting and grounding looked like.
Sure. So it involved me just stepping outside for a couple of minutes to sort of acknowledge that the sun was setting and go, right, it's the evening's happening and this is a transition time, and I'm moving into a transition where I'm going to be doing an interview soon and it's going to be public. And then I kind of connected in a sort of heart prayer where I asked for all of our energies to come together in the highest good, and for all of the outcomes and ripples that came from our conversation to be in the greatest good for everyone on Earth, for the planet, for the cosmos, for ourselves. And it's just sort of a way of bringing the three of us into a field together, really. And it's kind of a good practice for me. I've long been working with energy, but I'm just in the final week of a 3-month deep immersion into learning about the mechanics of channeling and working with energetics a lot more deeply. So this week has been integration week, so I've had lots and lots of practice at just getting that foundational stuff down pat. And so, yeah, prayer I have come to realize is a big part of how I boost my energy, by handing things over to spirit or to just the energies that are around me that have got more life force than I do at that moment, and asking for their currents to kind of enter my own body, I guess, and boost my energy. But we were sort of I was primed a bit for this by being told that the opening question is often about, how do you define, or what's your own experience of life force. So I've been thinking on that a bit today, and I think it's the answer for me is threefold, really. I was thinking about, like, where does life force come from? What is it? And in some ways, to me, it's an emanation of the great mystery. When I think about the actual physical, where does that energy come from? I sort of feel like humanity and all of creation is this just one giant wave of consequence from that first something that came from nothing. And so at one level, that's sort of what life force is. That's what's available for us, this huge emanation of. And I was sort of thinking about how does that's the mystery. How does something come from nothing? And then I was thinking about, at a human level, what's life force, and that moment of conception in a way sort of mirrors that Big Bang experience of this explosion of like potential and energy, where again it seems that something comes from nothing, and that expression of physical life force, I think, is a combination of so many things: genetics, and where you are on the planet, and where all of the matter in the cosmos is at that particular moment, and how that affects the way that gravity shapes your physical body and character, and that's kind of your innate life force and what you've got to work with. And then I was thinking about the idea of force as your ability to extend your energy into your environment to actually like create influence, and that sort of like definition of life force as well as an extension of personal agency. And how, for me, in the things that I'm interested in, like those three aspects, really, from the cosmos right down to empowering individuals to reconnect with that sense of like awe in their life force, not just the definitions that they've got placed around what their life is, or its meaning, or its capacity. And so I think if I define my work, it really has been largely based around agency, I think, and trying to instill greater agency in other people, always saying to groups of encouraging people to rebel and like, why are we putting up with this? And like, we could do this ourselves better. Like, why don't we give it a go? And yeah.
How Karila.
Discontent, yeah.
The punk doesn't matter. If you're punk, you're punk. Look at our hair. Like, if you're brought up punk, you're brought up punk. Like, the punk spirit never leaves you.
It's really true. And I was really, I had an experience of running for local council a couple of years ago and working out how to, again, it was this opportunity sort of to crystallize a lot of philosophy, really, and to put into practice another like skill, which I think is really underrated as far as helping flow to existing groups or between people, is flexibility and adaptability. That ability to sort of pitch your message in a number of different ways easily, rather than trying to convert people, I guess, to. When I first started off in ecology, I really wanted to work with people who were inflamed with passion and desire for the earth and the betterment of the earth. And then I realized what I wanted to do was have more vegetation in the ground. It was the outcome that I was more interested in than the means. And of course, I don't want to like behave in unethical ways to achieve my ends, but if the end result is the same, it doesn't really matter whether somebody's doing something for Gaia or whether they're doing it so that they can get more profit on their fat lands because now they've got a windbreak in. You know what I mean? The plants are there, they're in community, they're doing their thing, and eventually their existence hopefully will work have its effect energetically on the farmer who goes past the tree lot every day and is exposed to the vegetation. So, you know.
Can you speak more on that? Because you mentioned about taking life force from something around that has more life force, and like that for me, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I kind of feel like, you're saying like it doesn't really matter how the plants get in, but then they're going to affect. And I agree with you, but I just love you to talk more about that
Sure. I think what drives
relationship and exchange.
Yeah, I think a deep laziness drives this philosophy at its heart. And another way of looking at that laziness, which is a very value, and I'm joking, is like how to create more ease and flow. And in that, talking about energy and the mechanics of energy, the most energy is required at the beginning of projects. Like to go from stasis to momentum is a huge amount of energy, you know, not even just movement, but to get it to the point of momentum on its own where it's self-propelling, yeah. And so, and it's in fact in this channeling course, a lot of the exercises where I became a lot more aware that there are really passive ways to gain energy where you don't have to actually expend personal energy to gain that energy. And it's been really interesting actually doing laps at the pool, and I've never worn goggles before, and I had my partner gave me these goggles, and it's like when you see videos of people who are blind and they get vision for the first time, and that sense of like wonder. It's like this world's opened up at the bottom of the
The
pool.
underwater world.
It is, and there's all this bubble magic, and there's light magic and rainbows happening on the bottom of. I was so overwhelmed thinking about it. I can't even remember why I was talking about it.
So you're talking about more energy. You were talking about, because I asked you about like taking energy from something around you that has more energy.
Yes,
presumably
that's
water
right.
is one
so
of
I've become sort of like more aware that there's already things that are in momentum around you. And part of the skill of energy work is working out which movements and feeling aligns with where you want to go. That's why in my work, I'm not so interested in outcome. I'm more interested in the way things feel, both for me and how it feels for other people to work with me. Like that's the impression that I want to leave. And in a way, what we do is kind of irrelevant because the container is strong. It's adaptable, you know what I mean? So the work that I want to do is connect people back to a sense of themselves, back to a sense of belonging rather than estrangement, yeah, and to a sense of support from the earth to the point where they can relax enough in their nervous system to move out of like fight and flight and denial and fear, and to begin the conversation that moves them to agency. I mean, it's really not, it's slow work that's 2 steps forward, 1 step back in community. And by that, I mean that you have these visions, oh, it would be wonderful for this to transpire in my community. And then you go in there energetically and you find that there's all these kind of skills missing that are human to human skills that need to be restored before the conversations can even begin about. And this is sort of the nitty gritty systems change, you know, like it's the small group work and the consciousness changing that happens in, you know, one to one.
What would you say is most missing from your
the ability
experience?
to take turns speaking and listening? Really, really basic things like a curiosity about other people's frameworks, a lack of curiosity about other people's frameworks, like a not really wanting to know why. I've been teaching philosophical ethics to 11-year-olds for the last 7 years, once a week. And the skills that I use in managing that classroom are the same skills that I find myself coming to time and time again in group work with adults as well. And it's taking turns listening and speaking, and just the development of basic empathy. And in a way, this sort of has led to a change of focus in my ecological work as well, where I'm getting more interested in sort of eco-psychology. And
tell us about eco-psychology. Like, for somebody listening that doesn't understand what is eco-psychology, because I don't I think I understand it, but just for somebody that does not know anything about eco-psychology, what is it?
Okay, well, probably a good way to explain it is through a practical sort of example. So I used to spend a lot of time working with physical plants and doing bush regeneration as my main work. And it came to a certain point where I realised that there was a deep grief in me, even as I was putting on a hopeful face about the future. And eco-psychology is the overlap between the sense of self and the place where a person lives, and the way that those two fields interact to create belonging and meaning in that person's life. And so as climate change has started to really impact on ecologists' ability to do their work in the field, rather than just do nothing, I found myself looking for other avenues to explore ecological identity in, beyond just working in the field with plants, because a huge part of working with plants is, one, you've got to work with light. Like the seasons might change, but the equinoxes and the solstices remain the same. You're sort of like tied to patterns, but the predictability of the events around those unchanging things, like the pattern of light during the year, means that I don't have enough time to make long enough observations to know what is right action before things have changed so much that my observations are redundant. And so where do you actually go with that? You know, like this feeling of obsolescence. It's not like my work has changed. It's that what has to motivate me has changed. And it's a controversial thing to say, but I've had to abandon hope as like the prime motivator in my work, and it's been quite a liberating process for me. Why it's been so liberating is twofold. For one, hope, in some ways, I realised I was using as a bypassing device because it exists in the future. So it's a way of actually avoiding feelings in the now, for me anyway. And in that way, it can be tied to sort of addictive cycles of dissociation and wanting to armour the heart or protect the heart. And also, it's sort of a bedfellow to despair. And so to me, hope, ironically, ends up being tied into cycles of burnout and disillusionment. And so there's a wonderful writer called Margaret J. Wheatley, and she posits that instead of hope, we become islands of sanity, where in one another's presence we're able to discern right action, and that right action be the motivation for our work in the world rather than hope, because it's not tied to outcome, and it is always right action, no matter what is happening in the world. and if that makes sense. So that shift has been really liberating for me. Relax into it a bit more, if that rather than just be panicked all the time about decline and the end of things. And that's where the eco-psychology comes in. Part of how I know I belong to a place is because I can predict things over time. This tree is in blossom this week of September, every year of my entire life, and then it just curls up and dies for no reason. Or things that are it triggers deeper stories about not belonging to the earth and the earth abandoning us, which is, in fact, a massive projection, because it's we who have created the illusion of separation from that flow, that sustenance and that ultimate source of life force energy for us as human beings. In fact, we're an extension of that consciousness and life force energy.
Just talking about the difference between hope and despair, and then you said about right action. There's something that to me felt like there's almost ownership in that you're not waiting for something else. Hope is something that you wait for something else to happen, but you don't take any. There's nothing dynamic about that. There's almost a kind of resignment to the fact it's out of your control. But everything you mentioned after that, it feels like more empowerment to you being part of action, to being part of the surroundings. It feels dynamic. It feels more hopeful because you have actually taken some action, and there's an appreciation that, everything changes every day. And that's part of what gives us hope, right? It's not just sitting waiting for a single moment. Those moments happen all the time. And it's being aware of those and being aware of those cycles and appreciating when the blooms do come out and then they do die, because that is all the cycle, meaning they're going to come back again. And so I took hope from what you said there rather than that kind of despair of the cycle.
Sure. I guess for me, replacing hope with meaning, if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah, definitely does.
Your actions can be meaningful, whether they're actually achieve what you set out to do. And this, I guess, is what we're learning together, is this shift from this feeling of individual responsibility to what does collective responsibility look like, and learning how to take personal responsibility for your individuality within the collective. There's been a huge sort of erasure of self over centuries to fit in with groups, and there seems to be this emergence of a great acceptance of a much broader range of different identification occurring at the moment, particularly in the generations coming up below me, and that's really exciting change to see that flexibility, and self-identifying. It's that struggle between the individual and the group's still going to persist for a while, though, I think. Yeah.
As you speak about meaningful, there's something so beautiful in that, because I feel like our relationship often with plants and animals and other sentient living beings here is we've been very conditioned for it to be very transactional, even when we're saving them, whereas meaningful is suddenly relationship. It's suddenly hey, I'm going to do this thing for you, even if it's not the thing that's going to save you. Maybe you don't actually need to be saved, but I kind of felt like the plant kingdom, when you were speaking, I felt the plants really being touched by humans wanting to do meaningful things for them. That's what I felt in the field when you spoke.
Yeah.
That, kind of random acts of kindness or just bringing meaning almost, I feel like, might mean more than some of the like save the world, slightly human egoic relationship with human and other, where actually, you know, nobody likes a friend that's trying to save them, but everybody really appreciates a friend being thoughtful and meaningful and kind, as opposed to trolling, you know. And I remember once, like, I did a channeling, and you know, the woman was asking how she can save the plants, and the plant kingdom just came in and we're like, we don't need to be saved. You need to be like, we're not the problem here.
Sort your own shit out.
Yeah, like, work on your, like, don't, we've got this. We've been here for ages, and I actually think that humans have it too. Like, you've mentioned adaptability a lot. And, you know, one of the messages I've had from the plant and animal kingdom is they are amazed at humans' adaptability. Like, humans can like climb trees and swim and travel, like, compared to what plants and animals can do. We have like been given this massive, like, our great superpower is adaptability, actually. We just haven't acknowledged it as something that we can, you know, like, we're still obsessed with trying to stay the same or keep things the same, as opposed to going, hang on, we are the ones that do adaptability on this planet, and so we can climb a tree or go into the desert. Like, you know, a fish cannot climb a tree. Just can't. Like, it doesn't have that adaptability range that we have. Like, as humans, we have this amazing adaptability, and I feel like when we're meaningful, that adaptability comes out. Would you agree?
Yes. And I think that part of the reason why it's so easy to communicate with plants when you decide to tune into them is because that they can't move in that way, and they actually rely on that communication with other species to convey their wishes. Like, they need to send messages via pollinators and insects and pass on information that way chemically, but they also speak directly to the hearts of human beings as well, because there is, that's one of the, you know, I've been working with plants for almost 20 years before they actually started speaking to me inside of my heart and giving me instructions. So, like, there's quite a deal of patience required, but it's also like a garden's like a friend group where, like, you know, there are difficult, like, friends in your garden who, like, you struggle to get on with, and you'd like to be better friends with them than you are, and then they're the ones you've got this ease and flow with. And there's always plants that turn up in my garden each year that I haven't planted, that birds have like put in there magically through their droppings, and yeah. I think that in fact, climate change has, like, probably deepened my, like, sense of connection to the wheel of the year, because I, again, had to abandon markers like seasons, which, as far as practicing the craft, I've never really, like, cut it down here in Australia. I mean, it's fine to transpose and say, okay, we're doing, like, Litha, not Yule down here, but it's not, Litha's not Capricorn energy. Like, it's, those systems came out of the Northern Hemisphere, you know, like, and so there's too much juggling, like, there's too much juggling down here, you know. It can't suddenly be Cancer instead of Capricorn season.
I am just like,
the upside downness.
I'm blown. I'm mind blown, and I'm thinking of other conversations we've had with astrologers and with Louise, who was talking about how in the Chinese wheel of the year, she said that in Chinese medicine, the season ends when it ends. Like, so there isn't like a day for the season to change. It's when winter ends and it's actually happened that they decide that it's now spring. Do you see what I mean? And like that's kind of closer to Australia,
where I live, like on Wiradjuri country in this part of country. So including a windy season, which is like this really tricky false spring at the start of August, where you get 2 weeks of like super warm weather and you think, yeah, winter's over. And then this feral wind comes up from the southern Antarctic Ocean for the next month and it's windy season and it gets real and you're like, no, winter's not over. You've had that fortnight of energy that gets you through that last stretch of winter, like into spring. You get the hope. You're like, yes, I've had that taste of spring now, and I can make it through to the true spring But down in Melbourne, where Fee was living, the seasons would be completely different down there and recognised differently on different country. Yeah.
And Melbourne is famous for 4 seasons in one day. That's what they used to say about Melbourne. It was so changeable. You just never could tell. But I wish everybody could see you when you talk about your plants in your garden, Jo, because I have to say your face just beams with joy when you talk about your plants in your garden. I can just feel how much joy it brings you to work with plants. It's literally written all over your face. It definitely. Would you say that's where you get your life force from? Being in your garden?
Definitely, and it's where I get my lessons about what is appropriate action for right now. I just look around me and I see what's happening in my garden, and I'm like, well, that's what's appropriate action. That garden looks like it needs a bit more compost. Gee, am I nourishing like enough areas of my life so that they'll be like it won't be some flogged out soil that I can't grow things in when it's appropriate, like to plant seeds. Part of having access to more consistent energy, there's an Australian expression about you stop trying to push shit uphill. And it's sort of like, it's a bit like, you know the timing's not right for something, but you want it to happen. And you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing and you're making a little bit of progress. And then all the things come together and everything happens in 2 days. You've been trying to like push for the past 3 months. You could have just let be. And I guess that's what I was getting into earlier about becoming more sensitive to what's moving and available around you energy-wise, because there's lots of different streams moving around you at any given time. So do I want slow energy? What's the slow-moving energy around me that I know that when I go there, I can feel my energy go slower? Okay, so I can go to that place. And then you just use your imagination. I just imagine myself like sort of sliding into that energy sideways, and I catch a lift with that, and I don't have to then expend my energy. I can sort of like imitate it, yeah, and learn. And it's a bit like how I learnt to sing. When you're singing with a band or like on a stage, you often, you can't hear the band properly to hear whether you're singing in pitch. And so how I learnt what different notes were was I know that I'm making that note when my ear's vibrating in this part of my skull. That's how I know that I'm singing in tune, like for that note. And so when I sing, it's actually like an exercise in vibrating parts of my skull so that I know that I'm like singing in tune. Right, and that way it doesn't matter whether I can hear the band or not. I know that I sound awesome.
I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned when you wrote to us about the systematic energy vampire of
capitalism.
Would you say that? And I want you to speak a bit more about that. But like, I feel like dropping into another energy flow is a brilliant way to get out. Or if you feel that energy vampire sucking on you, it's like as you were speaking, I was like, that's a brilliant way to get out of that energy vampire vibe and into a different current. Like, it's almost like that human adaptability of like, I'm going to go and be a rock now and just not be on the same place as the energy vampire when it's affecting me. I don't know if that resonates, but it's just what I was seeing when you were speaking.
Yeah, I think about that a lot of Karila in relation to activism, because but for so long in my life, my parents were heavily involved in anti-nuclear activism in the 70s and 80s, and in feminist activism, and so much of activism in the later part of the last century, and into this century, was very oppositional, and it was big against things. And at a certain point, I came to realise that it actually felt like I was energising systems with my oppositional energy, because it was still actually acknowledging somehow their legitimacy to oppose them. And what systems of power really fear is disengagement, not opposition. And
sorry, just let that land a moment.
yeah.
Like, that is such an important statement you've just said. And can you just repeat it again, because I really want everybody listening to hear
systems
it.
of power want engagement at any cost, and they don't care whether it's negative engagement, as long as you remain engaged. What they fear is disengagement and removal of your energy from their systems, because that's what they feed on, your engagement.
And that's why they say it's better to, rather than be anti-war, our message should be pro-peace. So we are actively, so it's not being anti the thing that you are opposing, because that in itself still gives it energy and there's a direct fight to it. But if you're pro something, then it's not giving it's giving a different energy against the thing that you're trying to oppose. I'm not speaking very well, but do you know what I mean? It's better to be pro something rather than anti something. Would you agree? Does that go with the disengagement?
I think that destructive energy certainly has its place, but I actually think that the protest movement has become a place of spectacle rather than actual, like, direct and meaningful action. And that's why I would urge people particularly to withdraw. I mean, spectacle is amazing too. Like, Extinction Rebellion does some amazing, like, work using the spectacle and the carnival, like, and that sort of, like, atmosphere where it's a sort of a mirroring of a mad world, using humour and comedy in some ways to parody it and satire it, rather than everything have to be so serious as well. But yeah, I think it's sort of become a bit of a spectacle, and I think a lot of things have, like, become a spectacle, and I think that that's part of what happens when capitalism consumes philosophy. Like, it turns it into a spectacle because it wants things to be consumed. It doesn't want people to actually feel their own power. It wants them to constantly hand their power over to images or to simulations of things that are meaningful and real. And I think that that's why a lot of governments are in trouble at the moment, because they've actually, like, they've hollowed out the meaning of so many core values that used to hold societies together in times of immense stress. That when they now, like, beat that drum, it's just jingoism. That it doesn't. It's not a call that people respond to anymore.
It's not called to action anymore. Yeah.
No, it's kind of reflexive, and it makes people feel things, but because people used to feel things because there was a genuine foundation there that could be of meaning, that could be called upon to create outrage or belonging, but I feel like that's actually been that has been outsourced as well. That is also part of how capital dehumanizes and removes energy. It outsources people's personal agency, so that as a child, for example, almost everybody I knew could do basic car maintenance, fix really simple like plumbing problems in their own houses, and do a range of things. And they had these skills in their hands. And knowing that they had these skills in their hands created an underlying sense of, if things go wrong, I can take care of myself. So part of the way that capitalism kept itself alive through neoliberalism was the outsourcing of people's birthrights, which is knowing how to take care of themselves, to professionals.
I presume is where the witchcraft comes in, and the medicine and the magic, like, because plants are a major way of how we take care of ourselves when we're sick, and have always been, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Until they burnt the witches. Am I right?
Well, that's right. And that's kind of what's been interesting me as well, is sort of like thinking about the earth changes at the moment, and that seeing that there's going to be a mass migration of humans around the planet over the next decades, and that means that there'll be a mass migration of plants as well, because humans always take their plants with them as well. And the entire ecosystem of the earth and where's going to be viable for growing food is like changing, and there's just this massive flux and sort of shift occurring at the moment. And it made me think, well, how can we prepare for a time when we won't physically have access to a lot of the medicines that we need? What's going to replace physical medicine, and what's going to be the energetic like replacement for and could there be a new sort of, or an adjunct to homeopathy that uses vibrational fields of plants, or direct communication from plants, where the plant is the consulting physician in the room with the practitioner? So,
which I just want to say is ancient.
Yes.
There are tribes all over the world that use plant frequencies to heal.
Yeah.
My guides say that modern science gets it wrong because it tries to get the chemistry of plants, when actually the healing is always frequency. It's always the sound that the plants sing that is the most healing component in the plant. And that has been known. It's just in this taking away of our power, it has been dismantled in our own innate knowledge, I think.
There's a desensitization to our environment and the world we live in, isn't there? So there's not an appreciation of our environment and how we interact with it, and therefore what it can do for us, and vice versa. I just think there's a desensitization completely. We're completely comfortable. We don't ever have to step out of, in the moment anyway, knowing that things are immediately accessible. We never think about where our food comes from. We never have to think about, or a lot of people don't think about where their food comes from, or any form of connection to the land, because things just magically appear in a supermarket, and that's the only connection they have to fruit, vegetables and plants. And I think that, as you say, people are getting more and more displaced now, and moving more and more into urban areas. And does that mean that we really do lose that connection as people become more and more urban dwellers? And has that been an influence on how we've been desensitized to that nature and nourishment we can get from the land, and appreciation?
Sure. I mean, I think it's been a much longer process than that, and it's tied into thousands and thousand-year-old stories about us not having a place in the garden and being cast out of like the place of our own sustenance, and
a deep feminine wound, that Eve wound right there.
Yeah, I think I spend less. I'm trying to spend a lot more time in a state of trust, which is that I just let the things that are necessary for evolution come in and trust that they'll find their place. And so when I think about the history of life and how many times, even that we know of, like that it's come so close to ceasing, and humans never have the full picture, and to me that's a huge belief.
Do not give the humans the full picture. Leave them in the dark so that they don't panic more than they already are with the half picture.
One of the tenets of deep ecology is to let go of your idea of yourself as an individual experiencing pain as part of your personal story, and to even move beyond the idea that you might be experiencing collective pain of your species, to tap into the idea that you're actually a conduit for the very cries of the earth as she evolves as well, and that a lot of what passes through us and that we experience as fleeting despair or joy, or like that it actually is the consciousness of Gaia passing through us, because we are a mysterious and essential part of the consciousness of Gaia. And
we are the communicators and the translators, and like what we do is we are the ones that can speak to a plant and then send that message to a bird. Like we are, like the other communities do not have the conversation abilities that we have. And I think as we come into our human adulthood, because I believe that we're just at the end of our teenagehood, and so we're kind of graffitiing and rebelling and partying and like being like, I don't want to do it. Like, but as we come into our adulthood, I believe our role is to be in ceremony. Like, is to
indeed
to hold the ceremony and be in conversation. And I know you've said like new ceremony is, what do you feel about New Earth and new ceremony?
What I was just going to talk, before I get to that, I was just going to go back to this idea of adulthood and teenagehood, and how you said, our role and what our role is, and we're the only ones who can do this. And I think that as we become more mature, we're actually going to find that so many other species can, again, do what we think that we alone are like the holders of. And I think that the emerging metaphor for humankind of the mycelium that is like coming forward so prominently has got so much to teach us about how much communicating plants really can do with one another. But as far as new ceremony, it's just sort of like, look, it's agriculture's going to change, and we just can't be burning the wicker man every year like we've been doing for 5,000 years. You know what I mean? Like this idea that things are in the past, or that pagan ways are in the past, or that wicca's in the past, where it's a continuous, like a thread of magic that never ceased and is always been held by people on the earth and kept alive. And as far as that taking turns in listening, like one of the, just to begin that conversation where, again, the earth is acknowledged as the primary stakeholder, rather than ourselves as the primary stakeholder. I've been so involved in the Burning Man movement in Australia, and it was really interesting for me to see a group of people who didn't have ceremonial magic practice come together and actually have a couple of experiences over a weekend of ceremonial magic, and to see that the energy that could be created from thousands of people, like focusing at once. But it got me thinking, what would happen if I invited like people who who did have experience in holding space for ceremonial magic to come together. This is sort of what I hope to work on in the next year, this sort of like opening up this opportunity for inquiry with the earth that doesn't, it's not about seeding ideas, it's more of a compost sort of situation of like creating like the soil that will hold like seeds that come forth. But I believe that we need rituals for what we call climate change, which are earth changes, evolutionary changes that we're part of, and that is part of a collective healing crisis that is happening for humanity, that is also part of us learning about collectivism, and that is the shift into Aquaria. It's like learning, as I said earlier, about collective responsibility rather than individual sacrifice to systems, and it involves lots and lots of consciousness raising at like interpersonal level, like, because, and the hardest, what I'm all about is getting people curious enough to take that first step from like the path of like everything's fine and I'll just play by the rules and I'll be rewarded by God at the end of my life, and to see that the life doesn't fall apart with that first step, that, hellfire doesn't rain. The programming is so deep and gnarly over multiple generations. And luckily for me, my family were cast out of the church, so I didn't even have to my delusionment was probably cast on me a bit early in life. But I'm really, really grateful for that early upbringing in the church, though, because, it introduced me to singing in a group and how that can feel at a very, very early age, and what it feels like when people steal their hearts and create a unified field of consciousness, all thinking about one thing together. I kind of come back to, I'm not going to say I've come back to Jesus. I don't mean it in that way. I've come back to appreciate Jesus in a way that I sort of abandoned, I guess, in my teenage years, like a lot of teenagers do. And I guess that's sort of for me, being a Westerner, Christ's my access point to what is like a universal truth about, what goes around comes around, essentially, and the mutual obligation that we have to one another because of the mutual effect that our actions have, like, upon ourselves and one another. Yeah.
I feel like you've spoken so much about like meaningful action, responsible action, and what's come into me. It's like one of the ways to find that action is to just ask, what is the life force cost of this? Like, what's the life? If we come back to the protest, it's like, if you're expending your life force and giving your life force energy to the system, is it the right action? Like, is the right action where's the life? I think asking where's the life force cost, or even in the supermarket analogy that Fiona gave, it's like to go to a garden and remove a vegetable because it's grown is a much lower life force cost than the cost of mass farming, packaging, traveling. The life force cost to getting food into a supermarket is massive compared to the life force cost of gardening. And I feel like that question is just such a powerful question to ask when trying to discern right action. Because I feel like if Gaia has the main stake, from what I know of Mother Earth, is her choice is always the most life force efficient choice, or the most life force creating, even better, the life force creating choice is the choice of the Great Mother.
Yeah. I would agree with that. My follow-up question, and I can't believe we're nearly out of time already, but something you touched on, which I would like to ask, and that's about magic. Because I find there's something so beautiful in that. And I would love to know what you mean by magic and what that means to you. Because I can imagine people are listening who, you know, this conversation might be something that is very new to them and some of the things that we've been talking about. So what do you mean by magic?
Well, nothing less than causing the universe to align with your will.
Ooh, that's magic.
I'll give a more serious answer. I think that magic, in a way, is an extension of the idea of life force, in that it recognizes, again, that there are energies available around you. And it uses symbolism and the imagination to create stories that help you stay connected to the meaning of cycles in your life over your entire lifetime. To me, that's the foundation of magic. It's a meaning-making tool. And when you have this tool with you, you don't have to find the meaning of life. You have the tool to enact that as a verb throughout your life. It relies on things that are available for everyone at a pragmatic level, and that's the thing that I really want to emphasize, the pragmatic nature of magic, in that it helps you align your action with the time where there will be the most ease, flow, and available energy to support that, whether that be it's the time of the year, say we're on the eve of the summer solstice here, where there's the most illumination of the year and the most available energy for things. And so this is the time of the year to start the things that you want to have the most energy to start them, rather than, for example, trying to start them in the dead of winter, where Karila is, which is a time for protecting your energy and keeping a tiny light burning through the night until the dawn breaks the next day. So that's the essence of magic, understanding how you can use natural cycles around you to instruct you about the way to live a life that's going to give you more peace and harmony.
Wow. That to me is that perfect summary from start to end, because Jo, I didn't get the chance to say at the beginning, but the intention that you set and the way that you explained how you felt about that and the intention that you came in moved me so much that I didn't get the chance to say that at the beginning. I felt a real connection when you said that, and I was like, poof, it really hit me. And you've just done the same in that comment there. It's a perfect rounding of bookends of that, where I deeply felt that. I actually look for the magic in every day, and it's something I write down every night before I go to bed, is the magic. And I just love the way that you express both the flippant and I'm going to come up with the more serious answer. They're both connected in their different ways. So thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for such a beautiful conversation that, as always, takes us into new areas where we could have deep dive into any one of those. And I feel like there's still a whole load of questions we have for you.
So many places to go with you.
Always the case, but we will make sure that we will share where people can find out more about your work and can connect with you directly should they have some questions and want to follow up. But I know, Karila, over to you for the close.
I want to know who we should speak to next.
Oh, okay. Here in Australia?
Anywhere in the world.
Anywhere, but whoever comes to you.
Oh, man. Gosh, you put me on the spot there. You know who I want to say? I want to say this beautiful astrologer, Timothy Halloran, based in the US. He did my chart a couple of years ago, and he looked at my Cancer in Saturn in the 8th house of death placement, and he said, here's your mantra for the second half of your life. When your work is rest, life is pretty good. That's your mantra for that. I've really taken that to heart, and I guess that's to summarize sort of like what I really want to say about energy and life force is that it's everywhere and it's readily accessible, and it's not a bunch of tricks and spells and incantations. It's just a matter of getting better at observing and feeling and trusting, going with what you're observing and feeling. And that's at the heart of like being able to access more energy. All of that hoo-ha and frosting on top is just to keep people from finding out how easy it is to have better, more connected lives with more energy. It's really easy.
Love that. Love that message. Thank you so much, Jo. Honestly, it's been an absolute privilege to have this conversation. Thank you. And for your beautiful smiley face. Honestly, it brings me joy. So thank you.
May the life force be with you too.
So we just had a fellow Australian. I say fellow, like I'm claiming it now.
We're surrogate Australian.
I know, and you know, like so many of our conversations, we could have just kept on rolling for hours because we had so much ground. I felt that we still could cover, but we covered so much in that conversation, and I meant it when I said that, you know, for anyone that was listening rather than watching, that Jo's face just lit up the minute she talked about her plants in her garden. Like I could feel her connection and her passion to plant life is just incredible.
And I could feel the plants with her. Like there was some times when I was like, she's not speaking, the plants are speaking right now.
You love when you know, we asked her about like magic and how to look for guidance, and she's like, I just go out in the garden and it tells me what to do. I need more water. I'm using my phrases now, but like things like I need more water, I need more nurture, I need more composting, I need to just release and let go and come into bloom. And you can start to see, when you become more aware of your surroundings and conscious about the life force around you, how you can be in tune with it, how it can tell you. And I love the fact that she said, if you use your imagination, there's a lesson in everything around us when we use our imagination. That really hit me.
And I love that what she was saying about just doing stuff with meaning and kind of simplifying so much of the like save the world, you know, what she was saying about eco-psychology. Just there were many things in that conversation that blew my mind, but eco-psychology and our psychological relationship with the land around us, just like, you know.
And the one other point around systems of power, that they don't fear opposition, they fear the removal of energy and disengagement. And it's like, you think about it, you don't give airtime, you literally starve those conversations of oxygen. They can't exist. When the Rupert Murdochs are gone and there's no platform and oxygen or microphone, megaphone for those kind of like systems of power, then they just simply can't exist. They hate to be ignored. They hate it.
Those hate systems,
it. You know?
And maybe we don't even want them hating it, but maybe it's just like start the animal way, the natural way is like starve the food poisoning out, starve the poison out, and I love as well that she gave that I'm going to use this like concept of tapping into the energy flows that are around you. So you're not having to, it's like a way out of this self-sufficiency wound, self-sufficiency life force wound. I think so many of us in the West are just absolutely hammering. Like, I'm going to be applying that idea of tapping into the other currents literally today.
I love it when we've got a takeaway that's immediate. And I'm going to be doing what I do every night, and I'm going to be looking for the magic in the day before I go to bed. So yeah, another great conversation that took us on all different directions, and hopefully some new wisdom for everybody and curiosity for everybody that's listening. So yeah, we're hugely grateful to Jo for joining us.
May the life force be with you.
And you too.
We hope this conversation has topped up your life force energy. If it has, then please help us spread the life force. Like, share, subscribe, all of that. And may the life force be with all of us.